Role of observational learning, characteristics of domestic violence offenders, the associations with childhood exposure to violence by Bala-Aiyer. Through the turbulent experiences of domestic violence throughout one's upbringing, particularly in reference to the witnessing of interparental violence, as well as experiencing the physical aggression themselves, then leads to individuals to suffer a collage of mental and social issues, particularly such as depression, anxiety, lower self-esteem, and the somatic symptoms. Furthermore, the likelihood of the behavior that mirrors the recidivistic behavior experienced throughout childhood is increased, resulting in the continuance of the abusive cycle with a particular danger of committing violence towards one's intimate partner as well as general violence. Now, this study primarily focuses on the hypothetical question of intergenerational transmission of violence, a phenomenon which identifies the associations that exist between one's encountering of violence throughout their childhood, whether by the means of being physically abused themselves or just witnessing it. And this then contributes to the extensive violent characteristics that they then have adopted as adults. Furthermore, this is one of the main reasons that this particular study was chosen, where it focuses on the intergenerational transmission of violence, observational learning, where throughout their childhood experiences, these individuals have then adopted or mimicked the behavior that they have been surrounded with, and it becomes an essential characteristics of who they are as people. And furthermore, it is postulated that it further impacts the psychopathology of the offenders themselves. And this study's main aim is to discover three main aspects. So the overall generality of the crimes committed, so both violent and non-violent, the level in which the crimes occur, so how often they occur, as well as the severity and the brutality of these crimes. Furthermore, the third ideal that it does need to focus on is the psychopathology of the offenders again, which will then be assessed in accordance to the level of violence they were then exposed to as children. Now, this study was conducted by having a sample of 1,099 men whose ethnicity spread across African American, Caucasian, and Hispanic backgrounds with an age range of 18 to 65 years. Again, this study is one of the main reasons why the study was chosen is due to its diverse backgrounds in terms of demographics and age, where it was a cross-section of society, in particular of the men that were involved in the study, and therefore it was not primarily just one ethnicity, but rather a range of ethnicities. However, it must be considered that 433 African Americans out of the 1,099 men, a staggering 85% were involved in this study. However, again, this was a random selection nonetheless. It was not purposefully or was not intentional for that statistic. So again, the three main areas of focus needed to be found. So the generality of the violent and non-violent crimes, the frequency of the violent crimes and the brutality, as well as the psychopathology of the offender as evidenced by personality attributes. So, in regards to the general overview of the violence committed, the Child Abuse Potential Inventory, the CAP ratings, were used in order to examine the likelihood of being physically violent towards one's own children and partner. Furthermore, the ratings were then given, so from a scale of 0 to 2, with 0 conveying no history of being arrested previously, 1 being a minor arrest, and number 2 being having a severe offense, committing a severe offense, or more than one minor offense. In regards to the frequency and the severity of the violent crime were then assessed through questionnaires. And through these questionnaires, there were they were given ratings and from 9 particular options. For example, the 6th option was beat up. So this would be an option if whether the individual then beats up, intimate partner or family, etc. Again, in order to determine the level of brutality, so the options from number 5 to 9 were then added together to give a potential brutality rating. Now, in order to assess one's psychopathology, it then involved using the MCMI personality scales, comprising of antisocial, borderline, dependent, depressive, and narcissistic personality disorders. Now, once completed, the participants would then be required to complete another questionnaire, which then involved including answer questions about themselves as offenders, the victims who were involved, as well as the actual offense. And this then followed on with an interview. And once this then occurred, they would then be assorted into 4 possible categories: neither, witnessed only, abused only, and both. So, for example, if an individual was exposed to violence in the way that they were both physically abused as children and witnessed the interparental violences, they would be put in the both category. Whereas if an individual only witnessed the violence occurring within their home, however, were not abused themselves, would be put in the in the witnessed only category. So these are the particular results that were then included. So firstly, the general overview. So in regard to the overview of violent and non-violent behaviors, it then a significant difference was then discovered between those who are part of the neither category, so neither witnessed domestic violence or experienced it, with that of people in the both category, so those who experienced and witnessed violence. And as you can see here, approximately a 3.8 average scale rating score was given to those with neither, whereas those who experienced both had a staggering approximately 6.3, and therefore it was significantly different, and this trend was identified. Furthermore, significant differences was also found between those who only witnessed, as well as those who had again been both witnessed and abused. Again, it was those who were witnessed were significantly different. For example, about 3.5, approximately 3.5, and the both was approximately 6.5. In regards to the frequency and the severity, it was found that there was a significant difference, that it did exist between the neither group and all other groups in the categories, where those who neither witnessed or experienced violence firsthand was significantly lower compared to all the other groups, as evident here, where the neither is approximately 2.5 and the witnessed, abused, and both categories are all above approximately 4.8. Now, in regards to the psychopathology, it reveals significant differences that exist between, again, the neither and the both groups. Particularly for when assessing the antisocial, borderline, dependent, depressive, or even narcissistic personalities. Now, in regards to however, there was no significant differences that existed between the witnessed only group and those in the both group, with those individuals in those two groups were more likely to commit of severe offences and severe violent offences compared to those who were in the both category. And it was also discovered that antisocial, dependent, and borderline, as well as narcissistic personality disorders were far more common out of the 3 groups. So across the array of research amounted by the authors, they then came to the conclusion that the possibilities of committing a violent act towards an individual outside of an intimate relationship periodically increased in accordance with the level of violence experienced throughout childhood. And this assumption readily applied to the level of occurrences of violent offences, the brutality, as well as the psychopathology, and the general violence and non-violence also increase accordingly. So more specifically for the frequency, it was discovered, so the greater the exposed to violence, the greater the violence was experienced as well as witnessed, the more likely they are going to commit a violent act. And this was then in reference to, and the authors then therefore referenced the Waltz 2000 case study, where it involved individual children witnessing greater amount of violence and therefore committed greater violent acts. And furthermore, it then supports the modeling theory that greater the experience and exposure, more likely to undertake violent behavior. In terms of severity, the cases which then, against severity, it was the same trend. However, it must be considered in regards to severity, witnesses again did more abuse as opposed to those who experienced both. Again, however, there was no significance here. In terms of psychopathology, it is inconsistent with the psychological health problems individuals would experience as a result of the ordeal that they then had to face, for example, depression, anxiety, lower self-esteem. Again, the more likely that they are going to experience, the greater the exposure to the tumultuous environment that they have to experience throughout childhood, the more severe the psychological impacts and more severe their mental health. And furthermore, this, as a result of this imbalance and as a result of these mental health impacts, would then be a significant contributor to their behaviors. Now, a limitation did exist throughout the study where there was no non-violent comparison category, where it consisted of individuals who were exposed to violence and or witnessed it, yet did not become violent adults. And as a result, key characteristics between those who followed a violent lifestyle as opposed to those who did not could not be identified. Now, this could then be overcome through having a comparison category, for example, to ensure an accurate means of identifying characteristic differences can be made, as well as determining the true impact of violent exposures at a younger age. Now, another limitation was that witnessing and exposure to violence throughout childhood was self-evaluated, which can then be proved to be highly unreliable, where facts may be exaggerated or even downplayed, forgotten, and subject to much interpretation. And therefore, a means to overcome this would also be to use tangible sources such as police reports or victim impact statements, where the level of brutality and frequency can be identified correctly without lack of any bias. And here's my reference. Thank you.